Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Today's analysis is going to be a very short one, but I can assure you a highly productive one at that. If you look at today's newspaper, there are very few newspaper articles relevant for your exam. This newspaper is dominated by election related news, and even those newspaper articles which are relevant for this exam, we have covered them more than once in the past. But towards the end of this lecture, I'm going to provide you 5 probable prelims based questions. So please watch this lecture carefully. But before we start, I'm going to share 2 statistics with you. Yesterday we crossed 4 lakh subscribers, and I want to thank each one of you. Also, our daily videos are being watched by more than 2.5 lakh aspirants daily across our different platforms. For example, YouTube, on our website, through our app. And I would like to thank each one of you for your continued support. And if you want that we should continue with these initiatives, please like this video, comment under the comment section, and subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 6 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu. Bahubali is in jail, better halves join poll fray. Now let's extract polity related information from this political news. According to the law, if a person has been convicted for a crime and has been sentenced by the judiciary for a term of 2 or more years, this individual cannot contest elections. So that is one important statement that can be relevant for your exam. And even after this individual is released from the jail after serving his sentence, then for 6 years, he or she cannot contest the elections. These are the 2 important polity related concepts that we have extracted from this political news. Number 1, a person convicted by the judiciary for a term of 2 or more years cannot contest elections. And even when this individual is released from the jail for 6 years, this individual cannot contest elections. That is all that you need to know from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 7. There is a woman who might be facing cruelty at the hands of her husband or her in-laws or the family members of her husband. What she can do, under section 498 of Indian Penal Code, she can file a dowry harassment case in the police station. But the law as of now stated that the woman can file the case only in the jurisdiction of her marital home. That means she can file this case only in a police station under whose jurisdiction her marital home is. But what Supreme Court said, that this provision would continue to haunt her, and this amounts to continuing cruelty. So what the Supreme Court has done, in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court has said jurisdiction is no bar in dowry harassment case. This woman can file a case anywhere, and this woman can also file a case where she is currently sheltered. So that is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 9, voter turnout. And you can use the information provided in this paragraph if tomorrow there is a question or there is an essay topic on people's participation in democracy or people's participation in elections. According to this paragraph, voter turnout has come down across the world, especially in Europe. But it is more or less stable in Asia and in United States of America. And India has seen voter turnouts increasing in both Lok Sabha as well as Assembly elections. And that is thanks to the efforts of the Election Commission of India to enhance the voter participation in this country. And if more and more people are coming out in large numbers and casting their right to vote in the elections, that means people still trust the political process, people still trust the democratic process in this country. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 12. IMF, or International Monetary Fund, has projected that the global growth will be 3.3% in 2019. It was 3.6 in 2018 and it was 4% in 2017. But so far as India is concerned, India's growth is projected to be 7.3% this year. It was 7.1% last year, and it may be 7.5% in 2020. But now let's look at what type of potential prelims based questions can be asked from this newspaper article. Number one, what is this IMF? IMF was formed in 1945 and its headquarters is in Washington, D.C. What is the role of International Monetary Fund? Number one, the role is to promote international monetary cooperation, so that through this international monetary cooperation, we can facilitate international trade. That is one of the most important objectives of IMF. And second, if a country is facing BOP difficulties, balance of payment difficulties or crisis, the IMF provides resources to these countries which are facing balance of payment crisis. This can be another potential question in your prelims examination. But there are two very important reports that are released by IMF, and you have to be absolutely sure which are these two reports. World Economic Outlook is released by IMF. Global Financial Stability Report. These are two important reports released by IMF, can be a potential question in your prelims examination. That is all that you need to know regarding this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 12. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the member of parliament belonging to Lok Sabha, few years ago he made a passionate speech wherein he said that British owed apology for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919. And now what the British government has said, that there can be no apology for Jallianwala Bagh for now. And why? Because financial implications are one of the issues that are to be considered before a formal apology can be given for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. But Dr. Shashi Tharoor in his speech had said that while apologizing to the Indian public for this massacre, British government need not pay compensation to the victims or their families, but a token compensation of, let's say, 1 rupee can be given so that the British government can admit to the guilt and say sorry for what it did in 1919. So a question on Jallianwala Bagh massacre can be asked in your prelims examination. Now let us look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper, beginning with Technology and the Unhurried Mind, and this is about the electronic voting machines. There is a detailed video lecture available on our YouTube channel on electronic voting machines. If you watch that video lecture, then you don't need to read this newspaper column. And in the video description below, there is a link to that lecture on electronic voting machine. Please go through that video lecture. There is another editorial on the recent Supreme Court ruling on the VVPAT. The opposition approached the Supreme Court that the Election Commission of India at the time of counting should verify 50% of the VVPATs. Election Commission said if we will do that, then the results will be delayed by at least 6 to 7 days. But what Supreme Court ruled, that 5 VVPATs in a particular constituency should be verified. And this is something that we have explained in detail in yesterday's newspaper analysis. And this editorial now argues that because of the Supreme Court ruling, we hope that all the cynicism and the controversy surrounding the electronic voting machines and VVPATs will wither away. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper editorial. There is another column on Brexit on page number 8. And Brexit we have discussed in detail on 17th January 2019 as well as on 6th April 2019. So we don't have to discuss this column again. Now there is another column on page number 9 regarding the 10% quota in government jobs and in educational institutions. This issue we have also discussed in detail in our 9th January The Hindu newspaper analysis, wherein I have explained in detail about the 10% quota. I have explained the history behind it. I have explained the various Supreme Court rulings on the reservation system in this country. But what this newspaper column highlights is that there was no need to provide 10% quota to economically poor who belong to the general category. Why? Because the data shows that economically weaker sections of the society belonging to the general category, they are already well represented in the higher education. In the video description below, I have provided the link to this 9th Jan, the Hindu newspaper analysis, where this 10% quota has been explained in detail. Now there is another column on page number 9 written by Justice Markandeya Karju, the former judge of the Supreme Court of India. This newspaper column praises the Manipur High Court's decision wherein the High Court ordered the release of a journalist who was arrested under sedition. So sedition can be a potential question in your prelims examination, because even the Congress party's manifesto calls for the abrogation of the sedition law, which deals with section 124 capital A of the Indian Penal Code. In the video description below, I have provided the link to this sedition video that we have discussed in the past. So please go through that video lecture, then you don't need to read this newspaper column. Now let's look at some of the prelims based questions. Number 1, the Apurti mobile app recently launched by Indian Railways offers e-tendering and e-auction related activities of Indian Railways. Let's look at another question. AgMark is a certification mark issued by Directorate of Marketing and Inspection. Let's look at another question. Consider the following about Atal Bimit Vyakti Kalyan Yojana. It has been launched by Life Insurance Corporation of India. No. It has been launched for the insured persons already covered under the Employees State Insurance Act of 1948. This statement is correct. Which of the above statements are correct? Only 2. Because this program or yojana has been launched by Employees State Insurance Corporation, and this Employees State Insurance Corporation comes under the Ministry of Labour and Employment of the Government of India. So statement 1 is wrong. Let's look at another question. Which of the following best describes capital structure of a firm? It shows how a firm finances its overall operations and growth by using different sources of funds. Let's look at another question. Recently, government has set up an empowered committee headed by Cabinet Secretary P.K. Sinha. For what purpose? To deal with the problems of struggling power sector assets. Let's look at a map-based question. Which of the following countries share borders with Israel? Egypt, yes. Jordan, yes. Syria, yes. Lebanon, yes. So all of the above. Let's look at the explanation. This is Israel, this is Egypt, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. Why this question has been asked? Because Israelis voted on Tuesday in an election to decide the next Prime Minister of Israel. Let's look at a previous year's prelims based question 2018. Which one of the following best describes the term MDR, merchant discount rate, sometimes seen in the news? And that is option C, the charge to a merchant by a bank for accepting payments from his customers through the bank's debit cards. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.